Yes. Okay, ich darf alle ganz herzlich hier begrüßen zu einem weiteren IOM-Talk. Mein Name ist Björn Negemann von Congress Media. Ich bin der Moderator bei uns und wir laufen mit großen Schritten, mit wirklich großen Schritten auf den nächsten IOM-Summit zu, der morgen schon stattfindet. Und der zweite IOM-Summit in der Reihe von den 12-Wochen-Programm, dem 12-wöchigen digitalen IOM-Summit, den wir dieses Jahr aufgrund der Corona-Situation haben, ist etwas Besonderes, weil wir zweigleisig fahren morgen. Neben dem klassischen IOM-Summit mit den Intro-Talks am Morgen und den vielen Praxis-Talks haben wir parallel nach den Intro-Talks auch noch einen weiterlaufenden internationalen Track und der wird moderiert durch David Terrar und den haben wir uns heute hier eingeladen als Gast für den IOM-Talk und deswegen wechsle ich jetzt ins Englische and I'd like to welcome David on stage here at our IOM Talk. Hello, David.
Good day to you, Björn. Very good to be here. Ich habe ein bisschen Deutsch. In the UK, we have O-levels when you're 16. That was the last time I could speak any German, I'm afraid. So apologies for doing all this in English.
Everything is fine. So, yeah, I just brought up the story about our IOM Summit who's coming up tomorrow, and it's going to be a very special one because we have also a parallel international event track, which also can be accessed as single standalone event as the Digital Work Disruption Conference. And you will be supporting me in the moderation for the second track. And that's, first of all, very kind of you. And thank you for that. And yeah, who is David Terrar? David Terrar, we know each other already from our joint forces on the Enterprise Digital Summit that we organized in London. You are Enterprise 2.0 and collaboration veteran, already long time, spending long times with consulting companies and finding their new way of working in this space. But please introduce yourself as well.
Great stuff. Well, we obviously co-hosting tomorrow. You and I co-hosted the Enterprise Digital Summit London, 5 times together, which is great. So it'll be good fun doing it again tomorrow, but in a digital, virtual format. It's going to be fun. So I wear several hats. My company that I founded with Alan Patrick and Janet Parkinson is called Agile Elephant, and so we're a strategy consultancy helping organizations with their transformation. We partner with an analyst research firm called Bloor Research. And at the moment, I'm actually kind of part-time acting as the sales and marketing director for the group that owns Bloor Research. So I've got double duties and very busy at the moment, but it's good. We're helping them with their kind of approach to transformation, which they call mutable business, which I'll talk a little bit about tomorrow in my spot tomorrow. So yeah, I'm a business application guy. I'm a sales and marketing guy. I've been around in the industry for way too long. I can remember the time of the mainframe. The first time I touched a computer, it was actually typing Fortran statements on 80-column cards, which really does age me, I'm afraid. But I pretend to be young. And I've kind of lived through lots of the technology transitions that we've lived through in our space, from the mainframe to the mini computer to the personal computer to client server to the first version of the web. And what we're even before 2020, what we were experiencing in the world was the most disruptive time ever for technology. And lots of emerging technologies all happening at once, and so there are lots of people like us who've been talking about collaboration and working better and doing more with less. And suddenly all of our transformations have had this strange kick forward and acceleration because of the pandemic. It's obviously a terrible health hazard for all of us and terrible for in lots of ways, but it's actually moved forward some things to do with transformation in ways that none of us could possibly have expected in January 2020.
Have the organizations and companies already changed with this move?
I think the answer to that question is variable, because one of the things that we at Agile Elephant say is that there are no one-size-fits-all solutions, because every organisation is at a different place and a different stage, and they've got a different technology configuration and a different culture. So there are lots of things to this, but I think absolutely there has been, if you like, a permanent change. For most organisations, I think we've been talking about the idea of the future of work for 15 years, and we've been talking about collaboration. And I came to speak at I think your second Enterprise 2.0 conference in Germany.
So we've been talking. Forum, was it?
We've been talking. Say again. It's Cologne.
Enterprise 2.0 Forum in Cologne.
That's right. That was the one in Cologne. That was right, which was great fun. And then we were really talking about the start of people using, applying the social media tools that we were beginning to use in our consumer and our personal life inside the enterprise. And we've been kind of evangelizing that topic, ever since. And then suddenly, everything gets shifted forward. The accelerator gets pressed, and we all jump forwards to a very different place. So I think it's fascinating, and I think it will be a permanent change. I think that when you think about the workplace, suddenly everyone has been forced into this massive experiment where most people in kind of knowledge work positions around the world suddenly all got into remote working at the same moment. I mean, there are organisations where this kind of transition would be a project that they'd do months of planning for, and then they'd think about doing the implementation in 6 months or 9 months or a year, depending on the size of the organisation. Suddenly they had to do it in a couple of days or a week. And guess what? Most organisations actually managed it with not that huge issues and problems. And I think it's a testament to the cloud infrastructure that some of us have been evangelising and pontificating about for years. Actually, it all worked. There was very little downtime. This massive experiment happened, and suddenly people were, Zoom as a word comes into the vocabulary. I mean, we're using Zoom technology now. Who'd heard of Zoom? In January, very few. And for that particular organisation, they're one of the big winners out of this. They're suddenly, an international brand that everybody recognises.
It has become a verb. So we are zooming now, and
it's true. I mean, it's like Hoover. It's suddenly when your brand becomes the word for the thing, you're in a good place. I noticed that one of our compatriots, Ross Mayfield, has just joined Zoom a couple of days ago to look after their integrations. He's one of the enterprise irregulars bloggers that I always talk about. And you'll remember Ross from Social Text a long time ago. Yes. When we were talking enterprise wikis. But yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I think the organisations very quickly recognised that working from home works. And it's a permanent change, because I think very few organisations won't allow their workforce more flexibility. I mean, it may not be. I mean, some will allow their organisations to work from home, Some will say, we want you to come into the office for 2 days a week or 3 days a week, but we don't mind you being flexible. There'll be different ways that different organizations do it, but there's no doubt that working from home will be a big component of the future workplace. And that changes so many things. It means that the workplace design that's been steadily evolving for the last 30 years, where things have changed, and we wanted to make our offices look more like Google and Apple and have kind of fun spaces for people to kind of relax and collaborate in different ways. Suddenly we're rethinking those physical spaces completely, because first off, with the crisis, we're not going to be able to use them at full capacity because of social distancing. And second, do we actually need them? And do we need to use them in the way that we're used to? So the whole workplace design is going to take a complete rethink, and things will be different. So absolutely, it's permanent change for most organizations. And I just want, before I forget, that the organizations that are in the lead of this are organizations like Siemens in your country, where they've actually just issued a directive to their employees to say, we're going to stop thinking about hours in the office, and we're going to start thinking about business outcomes. And we from our point of view, we're not interested in how long you come to the office. We're only interested in the value you create. And the smart organisations will take a leaf out of organisations like Siemens and think outcomes rather than, because I mean, we've both lived through a scenario where to get ahead, you had to be seen to be in the office, and maybe even work weekends to be seen as someone who was totally committed to the organisation. Suddenly that kind of culture and that kind of attitude, immaterial.
Just as a note to our watchers, I mean, your videos always gets freezed when we are both on the screen. So that's why I'm always focusing only on one screen. So
Okay.
Just to let everybody know. So I'm not doing something different, another thing here in the background. So if you talk about the culture change, I mean, what are the big challenges at the moment, or what are you seeing as the big challenges in this move forward right now? I mean, we've seen that technology is not, it was never an issue very much, but certainly it was for smaller, especially in Germany, we're always discussing this also lately. Certainly not all companies are equally equipped for home office, for the home office situation, and the workers are not equally equipped. So this is still an issue, but it's not a big one. So what are your biggest issues that the companies and organizations have to tackle at the moment?
You know, it's very interesting. I interviewed JP Rangaswamy last week on a live show that I do, Impossible Things, and one of the great quotes he said was, suddenly work was a thing you do rather than a place you go, which kind of totally in one sentence explains that where we're at. But he picked me up a bit on the fact that I one of the issues of those of us who are kind of more knowledge workers with our own laptops and iPad Pros and smartphones, it's easy for us to make the transition to working from home, and there are other people who don't necessarily have the fast internet access, and maybe they only have one computer shared around the family, or maybe even only one mobile phone, and so there is a very definitely a digital divide that we have to worry about in this context. But to properly answer your question, I think there are lots of issues, and we're going to be covering lots of those in tomorrow's conference. There are loads of really good presentations by lots of our good friends tomorrow. But big thing is getting the kind of leadership right. It's a huge cultural change, and leading this kind of organization in this way has to be thought about totally differently. I mean, already the smart organizations were the ones where the leadership is more distributed. I'm a big fan of someone who came to talk in London at our conference, Vlatka Hlupic, with a book called The Management Shift, where she'd analysed organisations with the more emergent, successful, different style of managers, where you'd shifted from command and control to a more team of teams approach, and the leadership gets distributed from the top down through the levels of the organisation. And by the way, we try and have less levels of organisation because we need more people doing the work and adding value. We don't need managers. So it's those organisations that have a different approach to leadership and really think in terms of empowering their employees and shifting the budget holders from the centre of the organisation out to the edges, where they're close to the customers and where they can do the most value. So the people who are talking to the customers are empowered to do stuff, empowered to do things. So I think that's one issue. The other issue is that too many organisations have just kind of assumed that you did this by having wall-to-wall Zoom meetings, by actually having meetings and meetings and meetings, and forget the fact that there are many other ways to collaborate asynchronously and successfully, and that you need a balance. We've had a kind of like the first month or two of all of our organisations in lockdown. We were all trying to replicate the way it works in the office to the way it works virtually, and it some of that works, but it's not the only way of doing it. And actually, the organisations that will do better are the ones that recognise those differences that are required, and how they have to worry about the fact that some employees are perfectly happy working from home, being self-motivated, can actually get the job done. There are others where it doesn't work, where they're just not used to it. They need the community at the office to make it work. So the smart organisations will be the adaptable, flexible ones who recognise the differences that are required.
What new forms of collaboration do we need? I mean, you talked about the asynchronous and synchronous formats, well, how we can share information and distribute knowledge throughout the company, but also in regards to the more emotional thing that you also mentioned, was people needing also their co-workers to be complete at the end with their lives. What new formats do we need? What do you think?
Well, it's just interesting, and I think that probably there are a lot of people that are going to be speaking at the event tomorrow who've been around for the last 10 or 15 years within our kind of enterprise collaboration kind of world, where there's an awful lot of learning that we've done over that 15 years, which applies to where we're at now. And there are some things that people are just beginning to find out now, where some of us, I can picture Luis Suarez, who's opening the conference tomorrow, saying, "Hang on a minute, I've been doing that for over 10 years." He's the guy that became famous when he worked at IBM. For being the man who stopped using email. And I think if you told me even kind of 20 years ago that organizations would still be using email, would still be sending attachments to each other to get trapped in an inbox and have multiple copies of the same documents, when we have so many better other ways of doing it, I'd have said you were crazy. But one of the complications with this is that there's a German guy called Riepel, Riepel's law, that no form of media ever gets completely replaced. And I think that Riepel's, he was a publisher, I think, in the 20s in Germany, and I think his kind of message about media works for a lot of this technology, where we don't throw it away, we add to it, we add new things. But it's all a matter about using the right tool in the right place. So I think there are things to do with enterprise social networks, things like Yammer and the like. There are things to do with using wikis. There are things to do with sharing documents, where some organisations have been doing it for a long while. They may have used G Suite, or they may use Microsoft Office 365 with Teams and SharePoint, or they've had enterprise social network products like Jive in the past. Those organisations are ahead of the game for this new world that we're moving into, where those kinds of collaboration tools are very important additional tracks alongside the Zoom meetings that we're all used to doing now.
I mean, you were mentioning this already before. We are discussing this transition and this transformation already since years, and companies are really much struggling on this. And now somehow it should be done overnight. This can't be done overnight. How long does it take us to really come into this new mode of working at the end?
I'm very optimistic
with this push of Corona.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very optimistic in that I think there's a Milton Friedman comment that real change only happens in a crisis or a perceived crisis, and I'll probably use that quote in my presentation tomorrow. But I think this crisis has made significant change. So I think that there are new ways of working to some that will be permanent. And I think the other changes we need to make, where we actually kind of relearn the stuff that the enterprise kind of collaboration experts of the last 10 or 15 years, that they've built up all that strong body of research and practical guides and methodologies and approaches and that kind of thing. I think we need to actually get those skills and techniques and approaches out into the open as fast as possible. And I think it'll still take years, but I think that those things that we've been talking about for a long time will be accepted by the average organisation much more readily now that we've made this big change. So I still think it's going to take a few years, but I think there'll be a lot of organisations that are using collaboration tools very differently in a year's time.
But still,
part of our job for tomorrow's conference is to evangelise that, is to actually get that message across to the world and our communities that there's actually, you've just learned some really good ways to collaborate and work differently. Hey, we've got a whole bag more of good things that you ought to be doing too.
But in regards to the enabling of the cultural change and also the mindset change of the individual, I mean, this won't come overnight, will it?
No. Cultural change is always the most difficult. There's a hard road to getting a new set of shared values right, but I think for me, for any organisation, it's essential that they start thinking that way, because I think even before this crisis, it's my belief that every organisation should be in what we talk about as a permanent state of reinvention. That actually this digital transformation thing that we've been talking about for maybe 5 years, from kind of about 2015 till now, there are too many organisations that see this transformation as a project with a start and an end, and it's not. It's actually a mindset and something that should be continuous. That actually all organisations should be thinking in terms of competing with themselves on a continuous basis. They should be. We're big fans of things like the business model canvas and the other related canvases and the operating model canvas. That you should actually be thinking about your organisation on a continuous basis and thinking of new ways you can do things, because if you don't, some other organisation will. will, and we've got plenty of well-told stories of big brands, whether it's kind of Kodak or Blockbuster or Nokia, who were huge at one point in this century that we're in, and then within maybe no more than 18 months, suddenly they were dead or dying as an organisation, and I think that every organisation has that potential, unless they actually keep thinking about new things and keep thinking about getting closer to their customers, thinking about new and different ways to use things, to use automation in different ways, to use data in different ways, to actually think creatively. One of my, one of my big things. And actually, I'm going to introduce something sad here. One of my absolute heroes is a guy called Sir Ken Robinson, and he had the most watched TED talk of all time, more than 66 million views. Sadly, he died at the weekend on Saturday in a short battle against cancer. But his TED talk is all about creativity. It's all about how our schools. In most countries around the world, the educational system is kind of similar, with a similar hierarchy, and we actually need to be thinking differently about the way we educate our kids for the future to come. Because I mean, nobody knows what jobs are going to be required in 5 years, maybe even 3 years. So we can't teach them what they need, but we can prepare them for what they need. And one of the huge missing pieces is teaching people creative thinking skills. We have all sorts of study skills components within our degree courses and that kind of thing. Hardly ever is there a creative thinking module in the university course. And for me, that's a massive mistake, because I mean, obviously, big deal at the moment is automation, artificial intelligence taking away our jobs. I mean, the reality is that anything repetitive, anything with rules, if you're an accountant or you're a lawyer, or you're a guy or gal on the production line, obviously those kind of things where there's a repetitive element with a rules element, those kind of things are going to get taken by automation first. But there's no way that automation can actually deliver ideas, deliver creativity, deliver the innovation that organizations need. And that's from my point of view. Not yet. I think it's going to be a long time. I think it's going to be Kurzweil talks about the singularity and all that kind of thing. I think it's going to be a long time. We're talking about driverless cars. I think we can see driverless cars in certain controlled circumstances. It's happening already, and it will happen more on motorways and the like. But a totally generalized driverless car, I think, is a long way off. And so I think that anybody working today, the more skills you've got, and the more you actually learn about creativity and creative thinking, the better off you are in terms of actually keeping a job or finding a new one.
But you mentioned earlier also the importance of this new leadership mindset. I mean, the new leadership mindset that is needed, that digital collaboration is functioning. So, I mean, to get this working, also this remote and distributed work that we're in right now, and with the teams that need to proceed and bring up at some point of time some results, they need to function and get things done, and need, I mean, a common mindset on common values for leadership, for collaboration, and so on. So we cannot wait for at this moment of time to something happening in the future. We need it now. So what is your recommendation to get this transformation and transition faster, also on the cultural perspective?
It's interesting. For me, look to where organizations have transformed successfully and learn from them. One of my favorite books of the last 5 years is by General Stanley McChrystal and Chris Fussell and a couple of other guys that I've forgotten the names of. And you'll remember that we actually had Chris Fussell, one of the authors, as the keynote speaker for our Enterprise Digital Summit London. They were involved in Iraq War II, and Stanley McChrystal was the general that was in charge of American forces. Recognized that to do his job, he was getting beaten by this organization called Al-Qaeda in Iraq that was organized in a totally different way, that was organized in a cell structure with a different kind of leadership that was distributed around the organization. And he changed the American Army's approach and structure. And the book is called Team of Teams. And he recognized that he needed to coordinate a team of teams and actually communicate with them differently. He used to do a call with 7,000 people on it on a daily basis, hour and a half every day, to actually get the messages out. So our leaders need to think differently, and they need to, and I think that I have a special fondness for how forward thinking a lot of military thinking is, and how, well done, there's the Team of Teams book. Fantastic. This is what we like to see. There's a lot of really good techniques in there that come from the way special forces have been trained to work, where you know, within special forces groups, whether it's the Navy's SEAL Team 6 or it's the Special Air Service in the UK, and I've forgotten what the equivalent is called in Germany. They have a different approach to leadership. They tend to not wear ranks and insignia on their uniforms. The person who is the leader of the team at the time is the person who's best for the tasks they're doing at that time. And there's a whole set of kind of approaches to the way that you are trained up for the mission and the plan of the mission, but you recognise that as soon as the troops are dropped onto the ground, everything changes. So the approach is always about teaching people the techniques, understanding what the objective is, and it actually doesn't matter how you get there, as long as you've got the tools to tackle each task. That's the way it works, instead of a set of rules and command and control and the old way that the military worked. So I think the organisations that learn from those messages and start to think differently about their leadership and distribute their leadership around the organisation, they're the ones that are going to succeed. Oh, I've lost you. I can't hear you, Bjorn. You're back.
My fault. In the past, I always had issues in regards of this idea of teams that organizations would not have the urgency to really get this teams of teams approach as military forces have it when they enter the area of the enemy. I mean, so they're in the midst of nowhere, and they have to organize themselves differently. And organizations normally in the past, before Corona, have been always in a set of organized, planned situation, and maybe they change from one step to the others, but they never were motivated in having a simultaneous or instant change like special forces have, because they have always different situation instantly that they are being faced with. So is Corona now this this kind of accelerator for the companies, like this new situation where they find themselves in this this not discovered ground of the enemy that they really need to change now?
I think the smart organizations are going to recognize they have to adapt. it comes back to my point of permanent reinvention. Thinking and adapting on a constant basis, and part of this comes from adopting the agile mindset. We don't do things in projects. We do things in short changes that we adapt to what the customer needs as we go. And so you need to, when you switch from old style waterfall development to agile development, you need a different approach, a different way of thinking. Apply that to the management of an organization. And I mean, we've actually created our organizations with the wrong framework. Quite often, we've actually thought of things in terms of departments, in terms of functions, and that thinking has to change. And actually, the smart organisations they organise themselves around the customer. They organise themselves with cross-functional teams. And that IT isn't. It's kind of crazy that technology and information technology is a kind of a service to the business. Today, it is the business. Every kind of, doesn't matter what industry sector you're in, there's technology and information technology that's at the heart of what you're delivering to your customers. It's part of the product, part of the service. So we need to think differently about technology, and we need to actually create our services and our products with teams that actually have all of the people involved, rather than create the silos that we've been used to as enterprises in the past. So for me, that's the key. It's actually, we've got a change in mindset in terms of the leadership, and that leads to a different structure of the organisation and a different way of actually evolving the organisation, which a lot of big companies will take a while to do. But then there are other big companies like a Siemens where they can actually decide, I'm going to make a change and I'm going to do it quickly, and it's going to be implemented today. Those are the organizations that will still be around in 50 years or 100 years.
But still, you're always talking about this smart organizations, and all those smart organizations, they haven't been smart from the beginning. They evolved into being smart and understanding to be smart. What is your recommendation, besides of this new leadership model, on how to become smart in a short-term notice?
It's interesting because one of the complications with organizations, and I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek's Start With Why book. Too many organizations, when they start, there's a founder with a passion for a particular thing. That's what started the organization, and then as they grow bigger and they start to worry about the stock market and the share price and shareholders, suddenly they start to think too much in terms of what they do and how they do it and the operations of the company, and they forget their why. So I think that obviously the obvious example is Apple, where Apple lost their founder and went down a road which was very different under Scully, and then when that didn't work, the founder came back. And interestingly, one of the first things he did was kind of hunker down and wait. I mean, in Steve Jobs' first 6 months back at the organization, he actually cut out lots of products, cut out lots of development, and just survived for a period. And he waited for the next big thing. And then, of course, he was part of the next big thing. But it's actually all to do with why you're doing what you're doing, and focusing on what's going to be fantastic for the customer. I did a workshop with one of our customers yesterday, where we were saying, why do people buy from you? Why, what's so special about you? What's the DNA? What makes you tick? And the organizations that actually rethink about what it is that makes them special and why people buy for them, and how to make it easier to buy from them, those are the organizations that are going to succeed. And it's all about why you're doing what you're doing.
Great. So what can we expect for tomorrow's conference?
Well, I think there are going to be a lot of ideas, and a lot of actually. I wouldn't be at all surprised if a lot of us have that same message that we started with, where this kind of coronavirus pandemic has kind of suddenly. I mean, Satya Nadella talked about the fact that as the CEO of Microsoft, that 2 years worth of transformation had happened in 2 weeks. So there'll be lots of people talking about how much of a jolt this crisis has given the whole transformation and collaboration and working from home topic. So I think that will be a common theme, and I think there'll be a lot of people actually, saying, "I told you so." That actually, if you do all these things that we've been talking about for the last 10, 15 years, you'll be able to do things even more effectively as you come out of the crisis. Although obviously it will be a while before we really come out of it. I mean, we've got to, without a vaccine, things are going to be very different. I hate the term new normal, but things are going to be very different as we come out of it. But it will be quite a while before we get back to anything like what we could have talked about as business as usual. But I hope we never get back to business as usual. I believe we're going to create a new business as usual.
Great. So maybe you want to comment a little bit about the program tomorrow. So as I said at the beginning, we have 2 parallel tracks tomorrow. For the Germans, especially, for the Germans, we have 2 parallel tracks, because one track will be mainly in German, so it's not much of interest for English-speaking people at this point of time, certainly. But we start with a joint agenda at the beginning with introduction talks with Louis, Celine, and Sharon. So and a discussion also with you at the end. And those 3, what are you expecting from these talks?
Well, I think, I've actually had a preview of Lewis's slides, so I've seen some of the things that he's going to talk about, and he's going to talk very much about how it's not all about this synchronous communication of a Zoom meeting. Then actually we the asynchronous communication and the distributed nature of the way that we do need to do things is vitally important. So he's got some great messages about that. I know, Celine's, fantastic speaker, and I'm sure she'll draw on the communities that she's created in the past with when she was at Sanofi Pasteur and with her own consulting company. She's actually helping the British police force at the moment, so she's a great person. And I'm sure hers is going to be all about engagement. I know Sharon less well, but I'm really looking forward to her session, and looking forward to talking about it all in that end of the first segment. I like the way you do this, because you organise all of your conferences the same way, where you have two or three presentations and then a kind of discussion about those topics afterwards, and that's a really good model.
Yeah. So after the first coffee break, well, certainly we have at the IOM Summit, we have a lot of practices during the day, but all the presentations are in German, as usual at German conferences. So therefore we had, and we thought it was a pity just having 3 international talks in the morning. So that's why we added this special Digital Work Disruption Conference as a full day conference afterwards. Actually, as a background, this started from, this has also an own website, and actually it started from a discussion circle initiated by John Husband in March, where we have been in the midst of the beginning of this hard time of the coronavirus, and he suggested that we should exchange a little bit more on the latest insights and the latest changes. And from there we had several meetups and interviews, and this idea of this conference came up. So after the coffee break, we have another 4 talks.
You mentioned John Husband.
Yes,
yeah,
he's coming later as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously, John. Believe it or not, John. I was a customer of John's way back in like 2005 or 2006 with a blog editor that he used to sell. So that's how I first met John. But obviously, he's the father of the hierarchy concept. So it's great that he'll be talking. Great to have Isabel there. Lee Bryant obviously is from the UK and is the founder of PostShift, and people will remember his time at Datchis and his previous organisation Headshift. So he's an important stalwart of everything around enterprise collaboration. Although I guess he'll be focusing on the makeup of the organisation and the structure of the organisation.
And the chances that come out of the crisis. I mean, this is the second part for me. It's very much about the new mode of collaboration we have to find that you also mentioned earlier. So what is the good ways of working together in a digital way? I mean, Anna, she did a survey with Jaap Linsen that she is reporting of, she developed a maturity model on this, and Simon, he has a learning perspective also on the digital workplace, on how this can support our individual skill set building and so on. And I mean, that's a little bit the focus of the second chapter of the conference. So we're coming to the afternoon, and actually we extended the conference because certainly this is an international digital conference and we're all living in different time zones, and we have speakers who just start at lunchtime, our time, and therefore we have all the Americans after lunchtime. So what are you expecting from those talks?
Well, you've got my good buddy Diane Hinchcliffe, and obviously, he and I have been business partners and are, been around in this space together. And he's another of my enterprise irregulars blogging friends. He I know he's got some of the best diagrams to kind of visualize the change and the structure and the approaches that are required for this new type of collaboration. So I'm looking forward to his kind of post-pandemic kind of playbook as to how organizations need to think and operate. That will be great. I'm really looking forward to John talking hierarchy, and the other speakers look really good too. So it's going to be a good afternoon. And then you've got me joining up the dots. Oh, of course, we've got Catherine Shinners
we're not at the end.
We've got loads to go. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so this is just until our coffee break in the afternoon. So we have John Howell with KM, knowledge management and change perspective, certainly also. And then we're coming to the organizational part after the afternoon coffee, or our afternoon coffee break. And we'll certainly have John on here on the aspect of hierarchies and new organizational structures that we have to focus on and direct ourselves towards. And then we're also discussing this leadership aspect, as you mentioned before, and the innovation and creativity part.
Very good.
At that point.
Good.
So this is very much at that point. And then again, we're not at the end. We have Erika Jacobi. She's German, but living already in New York since I think 10 or 15 years. And she's really much into this adaptive organizational design stuff. So how organizations need to find a new adaptive model to get along with the external changes that they're facing. And yes, at the end, you're putting everything together.
Excellent, joining up the dots. It's interesting in that you mention knowledge management and community there, and one of the things that's really interesting here is that there's not every organisation thinks in terms of communities. Not every organisation thinks in terms of knowledge management. There are whole kind of areas of expertise with lots of things to learn from that overlap in getting this kind of thing right, and it will be interesting to see the way Lee Bryant's ideas mixed with Diane's ideas, mixed with the lady that I've now forgotten the name of, with her
Erica
the one that lives in New York now. It's going to be really interesting because that's the strength of a conference like this, is the fact that you actually get lots of different viewpoints to kind of really get at the problem and understand what the solution should be.
Great. Thank you.
Hopefully I can join up the dots and summarize it all at the end now, I'm hoping.
Well, we're looking forward to it. So great to have been able to have this chat with you this afternoon on the conference tomorrow. We're very much looking forward to it. And yeah, thank you again for your time. Thank you again for your support also in this conference tomorrow. And yeah, see you tomorrow. And out there, thanks everybody for watching or watching later, as this is still on the net. And you can still register for the conference. Certainly, there are different tickets, and what we certainly recommend the premium ticket, which includes also recordings, so you don't need to follow live the whole day, but you can also watch the recordings afterwards. So,
and that means you'll get to watch the more American version of the agenda and people like Dion.
Yes, as well.
And me.
Great. Thank you. And ja, wir sind am Ende. Thank you, everybody. And have a good day.
See you all tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Just stay there a second.